now live, Chair.
Thank you very much. And oops, let me just do the consent. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the Flood Recovery and Resilience Programme Board, Friday the 8th of December 2023. I'm Councillor Jane Scullion. I'm going to be chairing this online meeting this morning via Zoom. You're all very welcome. And I have to say that there is never a time of year in Calderdale when flooding is not a topical topic, really. And I have to say last night's flood alert was not entirely welcome, but fortunately things got a bit quieter during the night. But it feels like it's kind of never ending, really, in terms of thinking about flooding and how we prevent flooding in Calderdale. First of all, I'm going to take item 1, substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies for absence. Diane?
Yes, Chair. We have Councillor Prashad is substituting for Councillor Holdsworth. We do have apologies from Councillor Holdsworth, Mark Heath from Canal and River Trust, Rachel Hellings from Network Rail, Steve Duncan from the Community Rep, and Adam Ashman for Yorkshire Water. But there are other officers in attendance for them.
Right, lovely. Thank you. You're all very welcome. Let me move on to item 2, members' interests, and I shall start with members' interests in declaring, as I declared at the last committee, anything to do, and I see they are actually in the papers in front of you today, anything to do with the schemes for Errington Hillside and the Hebden Bridge Flood Alleviation Scheme. Anybody else want to declare interests? Not seeing MD indicating. Thank you. Okay, admission of the public is the next item, and it's not recommended that the public be excluded from any item on this agenda. So if we move on then to the minutes. The meeting was held actually, last meeting on the 21st of July. Is there anything from the minutes that people particularly want to highlight, or are people content for me to sign them as a correct record? I've had to read through and I couldn't see anything in particular. Say no. No. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then to the Environment Agency Hebden Bridge Flood Alleviation Scheme, Hebden Bridge FAS, as it's called, and that's an oral report from the Environment Agency. And I'm not quite sure who's taking that. Is that you, Christian? Hall?
That is me. So I've got a presentation to deliver. I hope that's okay. Let me just pull it up. What I'll do, I won't be able to see hands up in the presentation, so if I can run through it and then...
If you could run through it quickly, Christian, and then we'll take a bit of a discussion and questions at the end. Thank you.
Okay, let me just share the screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that.
That is now up. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so for those who don't know me, so my name is Christian Merriman. I'm a Senior Flood Risk Management Advisor with the Environment Agency, working on the group of Hebden Bridge Flood Alleviation Schemes. So what I'll just run through today, I'll just run through, I think everyone on this call understands the importance of the scheme for Hebden, but nevertheless, I think it's worth sort of touching on why we're delivering this important project. I'll talk through the scheme overview, not only on the main Hebden scheme, but also on Stubbinghorn Road and Errington Hillside, because although they are 3 separate schemes that we're delivering, for all intents and purposes, they're one big scheme for Hebden Bridge. I've just touched on some of the key challenges that we've faced for the development of this project, then provide some updates on where we are with the 3 projects, and then look at an indicative programme to show you where we are and where we hope to be on these 3 projects. So I think everyone on this call knows that Hebden Bridge sits in a steep-sided rapid response catchment on the Calder and Hebden Water. It's arguably one of our most vulnerable communities in the Upper Valley, if not in the country. It's a fast-responding catchment with risks to life. There's There's a long history of flooding in this community. We don't currently have any formal flood defences, and the onset of flooding can start anywhere from a 1 in 5. So that's at the moment around a 20% chance in any given year of flooding from both the river and from surface water coming off the hillsides. This is a much needed scheme for the community, and after the 2015 Boxing Day floods, we had ministerial commitment from the then Environment Minister to deliver schemes in the Calder Valley, namely Brighouse, Mythenroyd and Hebden Bridge. There are around 357 properties, moderate to very significant risk of flooding, both from surface water, the canal, and fluvial flooding from Hebden water and the River Calder. So we've separated the project into three main scheme areas. So the main scheme that we're looking at delivering is within Hebden Bridge Town Centre, so providing protection from Hebden water and the River Calder. That's primarily going to be through a case of strengthening existing riverside properties, raising existing riverside walls, strengthening existing riverside walls, installing raising flood barriers around the scheduled ancient monument, the Packhorse Bridge, and also utilising glass panelling along areas like Old Gate around Innovation Mill to maintain that connection with the watercourse. In terms of surface water management, these areas where you can see the sort of purple blocks, that's where we're looking at collecting surface water coming onto the road systems, and where you can see the dark blue dashed lines, that's where we're proposing to put upsized surface water drainage in to help collect, add some storage and convey that surface water away from the roads and properties to a surface water pumping station. So you'll be able to see on the plan the red line that comes across the Memorial Gardens underneath Calderholmes Park to the red block here. That's a proposed pumping station in Calderholmes Park where we're proposed to discharge the surface water back into the River Calder at a safe managed rate. The third element will also be a canal overflow. The canal overflow, the canal we know floods properties around Stubbingham Road, around Hevel End, and also comes out on the marina and causes problems to properties around New Road as well. The canal overflow will essentially kind of provide benefits to all three projects, to the Hebden Bridge scheme, also the Stubbingham Road scheme and the Errington Hillside scheme. This will essentially be built at the Old Vale Centre adult education site, and the proposal of that will be to, again, safely convey canal flood water back into the River Calder at a measured rate, rather than that being able to spill sort of where it likes at Stubbingham Road, Hevel End and New Road as well. Stubbingham Road, just a little bit upstream of Hebden Bridge, has been separated out as its own standalone project. Again, this will be containment of the watercourse, so taking down the existing riverside wall along Stubbingham Road, rebuilding and putting in a flood defence structure along the run of Stubbingham Road. At the top end, where there's the Ginnell, there is a flow route from the footpath, from the footbridge that allows water to first spill, come down here and affect properties at Stubbingham Road. So proposing a raised ramp in this location to cut off that flow route. At the top end, there's a couple of properties here. One property will be strengthened and flood-proofed. The other property adjacent to the bridge is a dilapidated structure that will be demolished and replaced with a flood wall properly tied into the bridge. At Bridges Lane, there's a number of properties that will need some flood protection in the gardens. So there's been a lot of consultation with these individuals to decide what's going to be done in terms of a defence here. And then along the canal, again, as I've mentioned before, we know the canal can spill and flood properties from the top end. So the proposal will be to put in some new ramps at various locations at the access points, and then put in containment along the canal edge to provide that protection. Errington Hillside, this scheme has changed somewhat since our original proposals to what I think is going to be fundamentally a better scheme for Errington Hillside. So you can see the orange blocked out areas. They're areas where we're proposing to target property flood resilience. We've identified around 60 properties that are at risk of surface water flooding of the hillside. So in the new year, once we've got our full business case, we'll be contacting those property owners and offering property flood resilience measures to each of them. So that might include air brick covers, floodproof doors, raised electrics. Each property will have its own survey to understand what would be applicable and suitable for that property. That's where we're going to see the bulk of our benefits achieved for the project. Alongside that, we recognise that there's a substantial problem on the highways. So we're looking at implementing a number of smaller scale surface water managed solutions on the highways, two of which you can see sort of the green box there and the red box there, will essentially be upsizing and replicating and making permanent the solutions that the flood wardens already deliver with the various rubber blocks. Those of you who know the area might have been out and seen where the flood wardens deploy those. So one will be at the bottom of the ginnel here, will essentially be upsizing that, putting in some additional pipe work to convey that water back into the drainage away from the properties. Here we'll be upsizing and improving the existing system here to discharge the surface water into the canal and stop as much water going over Hebble End Bridge. In addition to that, we're clearing out the existing drainage run down Shelf Road, putting in some new gully capture systems, and also a new gully capture system just above the rail line here. And then also on Horsell Road, New Road, there's an existing surface water outflow. We're going to be putting in some new drainage here to recollect any overflow that comes off onto the road, get that back into the drainage and back into the system. In addition to that, we do recognise that there's some NFM benefits on Erringham Hillside. We've already worked with the landowner and Calder Rivers Trust to suggest some options which are being implemented at the moment. We're also going to be ring fencing some further funding as part of this project to work with the landowners and partners to deliver some more natural flood management on the hillside to try and slow the flow down to the communities. I'll just touch on some key challenges, both technical and environmental, of these projects. They are very complicated projects that we're trying to deliver in these areas. The first one probably is the design and build of the project. As I said at the start, Hebden sits in a very narrow, congested valley with rivers, the canal, the road network, rail network, and all manner of gas, electric, water utilities sort of running through the bottom of the town. There's ancient buildings, schedule grade 2 listed buildings, scheduled ancient monuments running along the watercourse, all that need to be taken into account as we deliver this scheme. Obviously, it's a thriving, active town centre within Hebden Bridge. Tourism plays a significant part of the local economy, so we need to ensure that our design takes into account those heritage constraints, and the building of the work essentially is kind of delivered carefully to make sure we're minimising the impacts as far as we can on that community. Just in particular, one of the kind of main things around the complexities of Hebden Bridge is just the number of different interventions that we're having to deliver across quite short stretches. So particularly here, we've got Zone A, so we're running from Summing-on Road Bridge down to Fountain Street Bridge. This is around, on the left bank, is around a 209 metre stretch with 3 different engineering interventions. So some of them will be simple wall refurbishments where we've identified the existing wall is strong enough to stand up, just needs a bit of repointing, a bit of refurbing. Some of it will be a full masonry reconstruction. A lot of the walls we found throughout Hebden Bridge are going to have to be taken down to bed level and then rebuilt back up so that we can put flood defences on top of them. And then a lot of the properties you can find Hebden Bridge, a lot of properties are built right up to the watercourses. They're going to have to become formal flood defences. That will mean floodproofing, repointing, but also structural strengthening on the inside of the properties. The same on the right bank, we've got around 207 metres stretch, and we've got 5 different engineering interventions. So each of those has been its own little design in its own right. Done a lot of engagement with the property owners and various partners to develop those designs. And each of those will have to be delivered sensitively as we construct the project. In terms of environmental complexities, as I've said before, we don't have any formal flood defences within Hebden Bridge. A lot of the watercourses have been allowed to sort of naturally green up with trees in the channel of other vegetation. As we come in to do construction work on this project, as we can put in new flood defences, it will create some change within the watercourse. We need to be very mindful of the environmental impacts of that. Sorry, someone's trying to ring me. We need to be very mindful of the environmental impacts of that. So we're looking at measures to mitigate that. As part of new planning policy that's coming into place, there is now what we call biodiversity net gain. That requires, from a planning point of view, for all applications to provide a 10% biodiversity net gain. So on top of the mitigation we've already delivered, we're looking at enhancing the environment there as well. As the Environment Agency, we've committed to 20% biodiversity net gain. So we're looking at measures to further improve the local environment. That is a challenge in itself, particularly with the riverine units, looking at where we can potentially secure those units. We also have to be mindful of the Water Framework Directive and ensuring we're not causing degradation to the water body. So again, that's taken into account with our environmental elements. There is a small risk on this project that the flood defence measures could cause degradation from a Water Framework Directive perspective. We are relatively confident that the measures that we've identified, including some weir management and modification to include fish passage, should be enough to provide our biodiversity net gain improvements and also meet the Water Framework Directive requirements. However, if we do find that some of those elements are undeliverable for various reasons, we would have to submit what we call a Regulation 19 document. That's essentially a document that would show that whilst there is degradation from a Water Framework Directive perspective, these are all the elements that we've looked into, and this is why they're undeliverable, and this is why this project is still required to go forward. We don't think we'll need that. We think we should be able to deliver this scheme without that. But to make sure we don't hold up planning, we're developing that Regulation 19 document as a precaution now. So just in terms of key updates across the projects, I think Paul's going to do a larger update for the Calder Valley anyway, but just for some high-level updates. So we opened the Flood Information Centre in Hebden Bridge this summer. That's a centre on Valley Road that we're trying to encourage residents, communities and partners to come in and talk to us about the flood alleviation schemes. As these schemes develop, there's going to be more and more information in those centres. The fluvial design for the Hebden Bridge FAS is nearing completion. We're just going through the final tender packs now. We are continuing our discussions with Yorkshire Water regarding the detailed design scope and delivery options for the town centre for the surface water scheme. As part of the development of that surface water scheme, you may have seen site investigation work going on throughout the autumn in the town. That's essentially been looking for existing services within the road systems, identifying them now so that we can build that information into the detailed design. That means when we come onto the ground to actually deliver the works, it should minimise the number of risks and hopefully reduce some of the time spent delivering those elements. We're continuing to progress well, securing off-site locations for the biodiversity net gain, and we'll continue to work with key partners, key catchment partners to identify other opportunities for more riverine enhancements. So we have to date identified 5 weirs where we're hoping to deliver improved fish passage, which will open up around 3 kilometres of watercourse for fish passage and environmental improvement, which will be a real benefit. On Errington Hillside, we've been working really closely with the Calderdale Council and the local flood wardens to develop those highway surface water designs. That detailed design has been finalised and we're going through the process of agreeing the implementation of that work, which we propose Calderdale Council's highways team will be delivering. Stubbing-on Road, again, detailed design is nearing completion. Those designs are being reviewed by our construction partners ahead of a pricing exercise. And again, on Errington Hillside, the proposal is to submit the full business case in January with a view to start speaking to those property owners about property flood resilience in the spring. Just to finish, in terms of timescales, so again, this is an indicative programme, so it may be subject to some change. You can see Errington Hillside, we're looking to start the construction of those highways interventions in the spring in 2024 with that property flood resilience delivered across 2024. Both Stubbing-on Road and Hebden, we're looking to have some pre-planning engagement sessions, potentially in February time, prior to submission of planning applications around March time. Construction for Stubbing-on Road will start later on in 2024, pushing into 2025, and Hebden Bridge FAS, the main town centre works, we're proposing to commence in 2025. And then just as a final push, as I've already mentioned, we've opened the Flood Information Centre on Valley Road. We do want to encourage the community and our partners to come in and visit us. So at the moment, the centre's open on Mondays and Fridays from 10 till 2. We've got teams in there during those times. So please encourage people that you know that are interested in the scheme to come in and talk to us about the projects. I'll take any questions. If anyone has any.
Thank you, Christian. Do you want to? Yes, if you've got that down. Thank you. And I can recommend a visit to the Flood Information Centre, and they'll even make you a cup of tea or coffee if you want. Questions for Christian on the Hebden Bridge Fasts and the Errington Hillside and the Stubbing Home Road scheme. Scott, Councillor Patient.
Scott's fine, thank you. More of a broad question than any about any specific scheme. So really interesting and positive to hear that you're going to go above the biodiversity net gain target of 10% and try and strive for 20%. You mentioned you were having some, well, not issues, but you're trying to work out where that might be best done. And I'm wondering if there was clearly you don't have to deliver everything on site, and I wonder if there are opportunities to sort of look elsewhere along the catchment relatively nearby to deliver interventions that might complement existing or upcoming work. So just really a sort of question around how you might maximise the opportunity. And I know you've also got stuff that you've said since, haven't you, about for every tree taken down you'll put 5 back in place and stuff. So I imagine that's a complementary piece of work. I'll stop waffling. I'll let you answer the question, Christian.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So in terms of the BNG, in terms of the terrestrial units, so the on-land units, it's relatively easy for us to achieve that 20% on Hebden Bridge. So that a lot of that is going to be sort of up and around the kind of land in Hebden Bridge. The bigger challenge is those riverine units, so the in-channel units. Trying to achieve 20% on Hebden Bridge alone in that local area is a difficulty. So that's why we are looking at kind of a wider 20% gain across the Calder programme, and that's been deemed acceptable. So kind of linking in with the other projects as well to look at those options. So in terms of those weir enhancements I talked about, they're stretching kind of all the way up Hebden Water and a couple on the Calder as well.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions for Christian? Toby, welcome.
Good morning, Board. Good morning, Board. Just a quick question. I think that the schemes are really, really good, and I'm just wondering, is there any opportunity for us to working with Network Rail to sort of do a sort of collaboration work, potentially sort of mitigate some of the risks that Network Rails is sort of currently facing around the area? It would be good to get some more information on your design so that we can actually work on some of the area, potentially working some of the sort of the risks that we have, as well as sort of the river sort of alleviation work that we could help out.
Christian?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Yeah, I mean, if you want to take it offline, I think it'd be worthwhile sort of sitting down and showing you a bit more of the detail of where we're working, the timescales, the projects. There's a few other projects down the Calderdale that I know Network Rail are already working with us on. So if there's opportunity to bring you in on the Hebden scheme, then absolutely.
That's helpful, and certainly around Weasel Hole Tunnel there, either side of that, certainly I can see that there might be opportunities, as well as Christian says, the work further up at Walston and so on, where the railway line is vulnerable. Any other takers? Right, can I just come in terms of the biodiversity net gain? Very useful to hear what you said in terms of the challenge, and I had no idea it was measured in terrestrial units and riparian units. I'm still trying to go decimal. I'm still working in inches, never mind these new units of measurement in terms of biodiversity net gain. I just wanted to say something about a feature we had noticed recently in Mythenroyd, just down the river, that we had resident cormorants on the river and sitting on the lamppost looking like gargoyles at night time. And I understand that cormorants only arrive when there's a fairly plentiful fish supply because they're divers and eat a lot of fish. So I think the idea of fish passages actually is very good because there clearly is enough life in those rivers, and it's great that there are fish there. I don't know if the cormorants are a biodiversity net gain or indeed the opposite, subtraction of the biodiversity. But I just wanted to mention that they have caused a lot of chat, as you might imagine, on social media. You know, we know we're flooded, but now we've got cormorants. You know, what does this mean for global warming? So I just offer that. I'm not expecting an answer, Christian, about biodiversity net gain in cormorants, but yes, good luck on the fish passages.
Thank you. Well, I'll feed that back to the environmental team as well for the ecology report.
Yeah, there are plenty of witnesses to it. They seem to have departed now for having eaten everything in sight. But, yeah. Any other takers, Christian? I will move on then. Thank you very much, Christian. That was extremely helpful and educational. And I think some of that, let's not go over the same ground. I think some of that in the next report, item 6, flood risk reduction and investment group. Pretty full report there. Is that you, Paul?
It is Councillor Scullion, yes. I won't touch on the 3 projects that Christian's mentioned, you'll be pleased to know. Okay, so my report's generally pretty positive when I've delivered it in the past. I think I'm going to argue that this might be the most positive one that I'm going to deliver. So, yeah, bear with me. The start of the report is just a few highlights. The first one, that the collaborative delivery team, which makes up Environment Agency, Calderdale Council, Yorkshire Water, BAM and Arup, have been nominated for a government project delivery award. I think that's a very fair assessment to get through to the final because of all the hard work and dedication that goes on behind the scenes and at the forefront of Calderdale as well. So fingers crossed that maybe pick up that award. I believe it's in February. So watch this space. Perhaps at the next partnership board will have an award to show. Who knows? The next one is around Brighouse Fast, which I will touch on a little bit later on, but the report was already slightly out of date because the full business case has actually been approved and we've got financial sign-off now. So it's full steam ahead with construction, looking to start sort of the end of January, beginning of February next year. So great credit to the team to get this major project through that sort of major milestone of full business case approval. So we're now ready and raring to go for the construction element, but I'll touch on a little bit more later on. And then 2 other projects that we finally completed, and no less important, smaller projects, but really important ones. Burnley Road Academy, which I will touch on very soon, and Shorewood Road Flood Alleviation Scheme, which I will touch on as well. So some real positives. So the first one, Burnley Road Academy, this was completed just last month. We held a bit of an informal opening with the school and reps from Department for Education. Councillor Patient was there. Who else was there? The delivery partner, Watertight International, EA representatives. And this scheme is now better protecting the school. So they've essentially got 2 lines of defence now. So they've got the main Mythenroyd scheme, and now they've got this suite of property flood resilience measures of floodgates, barriers, air brick covers, pumps, suds planters, which is a nice addition as well to capture roof water. So each planter, I think there's 10 of them, captures 300 litres, which is excellent. So it stops it or slows it down going into the drainage systems. And we had some really positive media coverage as well. I don't know if anyone saw it, but there was a 3-minute piece on BBC Look North with some of the children making comments, in particular the head teacher, quite an emotive conversation that was had with Claire Cope from the school. And then we also had lots of other social media positive responses. It's not going to stop there either. I believe the going to create a bit of a what's the word, sort of lesson plan for the school as well, around further educating them on the use of SUDS and flooding and watertight, and the Environment Agency are going to be actively involved in that. But the next stage is to create their flood plan with the school and train them how to use the products. But really, really positive. And I believe it's the first one as well, that first school to have property flood resilience measures via the property flood resilience framework. So once again, Calderdale leading the way. Next one I'll touch on. I won't touch on Hebden, Errington or Stubbenhome Road because we've already touched on them. So reservoir storage. This is still developing towards our outline business case. To look at that longer term option of managing the Hebden group of reservoirs to reduce flood risk further to Hebden Bridge and Mythenroyd. I think they're still waiting for some detailed further assessment, particularly around the yield analysis. So there's been a bit of a delay in procuring that element, but I know the Environment Agency and Yorkshire Water are working together to identify a route to progress that piece of work. So still progressing, but that outline business case looking at the end of next year now, unfortunately. Park Road Elland, again, smaller project, but no less important. That scope for that work has been agreed. Looking at all sources of flooding for this project and looking to find an economically viable solution to reduce the risk to the community there. It's going to involve a bit of a light touch model review, ground investigations, and some further community engagement. Calderdale Council have been undertaking some dye testing to really understand the flow and condition of the structures in the area, and I think we're waiting for some detailed information from Yorkshire Water as well on this. Copley, this is another one that's progressing really well, actually. So hoping to start the work early next year. The preferred option hasn't changed. It's still improved drainage at the cricket field to reduce the amount of water coming through the railway embankment. Sheet piling through the existing embankment to extend its condition or extend its lifespan, but also improve its condition. And then street furniture to reduce the risk of surface water flooding. The sheet piling element, which is probably 90% of the work, doesn't require planning permission. So we're looking to bring this piece of work forward, which is the piece of work I mentioned is going to start in the new year. We've had some really positive engagement in September with 11 particular residents who are going to be directly affected by the work. Unfortunately, they're going to lose some of their garden for a considerable amount of time, but overall it was quite a positive meeting. And then we held a wider community event as well the week after that. I think we had nearly 50 people in attendance. So again, positive, just to let them know what the work is going to involve. We've also undertaken photographic surveys of each of the gardens that are going to be affected, and we'll also be employing an outside company to undertake internal and external photographic evidence of properties as well, to ensure that if any damage is caused, we have a detailed record of that. And we're also looking at a canal overflow for this area now, upstream of Copley, to try and reduce that surface water risk, because we know that the water comes out of the canal at Copley Lane to the north of Copley has caused flooding in the past, so we're going to try and alleviate that as well, but that's in its early stages. Another project complete, Shorewood Road. This was completed in early November. Better protects 17 properties from the River Calder. There's a picture of it in the report. It's a concrete legato block wall which ties into an existing highway wall and then into high ground. The visible section from the existing highway, you can see, is being clad in a rustic stone to make it more aesthetically pleasing than a bare grey concrete Lego block, which is not particularly attractive. And within that wall, there are a number of outfalls to any water trapped behind the dry side of the wall can get out once river levels allow. And it'll also help with some surface water runoff as well to allow that back into the river. But another positive, small project, but like I keep saying, it's no less important, but another piece of the jigsaw complete. Hebblebrook in Halifax, finalised the detailed design work for that one. Our delivery partner, BAM, have gone out to tender to the wider market for the sewer diversion works. I believe they're waiting to hear back from various companies on that. And once we've got that, we're not far ready to go. But we're looking at starting that project in April next year. So another important project that could be or should be started in 2024 is going to be really busy by the looks of it, with lots of different projects being undertaken. Walsden, we just touched on that. This is that Toby mentioned about Network Rail involvement. This is one that Network Rail are involved with because we're trying to reduce risk to Bridge 96, which we know floods the railway line and the station. So we've liaised with them many times about this project. But this project has had to change direction ever so slightly because we can no longer utilise Ramsden Clough Reservoir due to funding constraints. So, and that's outside of the project's control as well. So we're re-looking at the options, although the options are still relevant in terms of raising the walls at specific locations, particularly Square Road and Vulcan Street. Again, we'd still need the storage on the recreation ground at Scott Street. We still need an additional culvert and debris catchers at Ramsden, Kershaw Road, and other road infrastructure improvements. But what we're doing is revisiting the preferred option and looking at that in more detail by undertaking further survey work, structural survey work of the culvert, ground investigation work, really look at it in more detail. Unfortunately, we've just received further approval to fund this work. So we've got the money to do it. So that's how we're going to progress that option now. It's still going to be a suite of options, but we're going to look at it in more detail. And another positive that I think I touched on it last time, that we had quite a significant funding gap. Now it's slightly less significant because we've been successful in getting another £10 million towards the project from other government department funding. So another positive there. Sorby Bridge, we have commenced our modelling work. All the surveys have been undertaken. So that's channel surveys, heights of walls and thresholds of properties. And that survey work will inform the modelling. And once we have that evidence base, that baseline modelling, we can then look at modelling different options to reduce risk in Sorby Bridge. And again, another positive that I think I'd put in the report that we were awaiting financial approval to further develop the project. Well, actually, we've got that again this week. So another positive. We're getting a lot more money in to deliver these schemes further. Brighouse, I've already touched on it, that the scheme now has full business case approval, looking to start sort of late January, early February next year in earnest. Unfortunately, the Winnie Hill Park will be out of use for the duration of the construction. However, the playground, skateboard park and cafe will be accessible in Wellhome Park. And the team are looking at producing information boards, which you may remember we had on the Mythenroyd scheme, which will be positioned at different areas of the park to give an update and to the community about what is going on in the park. And also a wider scheme leaflet going to be delivered to the Brighouse postcodes in its entirety. So again, sending out those positive comms about what's going on. And then also they're looking at a community information day in January next year. And I believe the team are meeting the town board next week as well, so that keeps them in the loop. And then the final couple of projects, back Waterloo, we're undertaking a modelling exercise for this one, but utilising existing modelling that we've had carried out upstream. And the most recent piece of this work was the team held an optioneering workshop to reduce the long list of options down to a short list of options, although that short list of options is at least 8 or 9, because one option here will not solve the situation. It's going to be a suite of options. And if you don't know it, it's just upstream of Todmorden. It's an area that's caught or has persistent and significant scour along Walsden Water. And we've tried to rectify it in the past with rock armour solutions, so large stone. However, this isn't working, and we need a long-term solution to this area to prevent further erosion. And then the final scheme is Callis Bridge. We've undertaken a data review for this. Unfortunately, we have a lot of data, but it's out of date, so it will need to be revisited. Until before that, though, we're going to take a high-level economic analysis to really gain an understanding of what the benefits are, what the damages avoided might be, so we know what we're working towards. If that hopefully that makes sense. But once we've got that piece of information, I'll look to progress that business case to reduce risk in Callis. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. I think I can agree with you that it is indeed the most positive report you have ever given, actually. Really nice. Congratulations on the various awards. And also, congratulations, finally see the word completion, beginning to appear in some of these longed-for projects. So that's very pleasing. Thank you for that. And thank you for the update on the others. I'm going to bring Councillor Lee in first. And then Councillor Patient. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Paul, thank you very much for that report. It was indeed heartening, and I absolutely endorse Councillor Scullion's comments. There's just one query I have. It's obvious on all of these schemes, modelling is widely used to get all the numbers right. I'm particularly interested on item 5 on reservoir storage, about the modelling. It says some of it's complete, but I wonder if any of these models are available for inspection by members of the Calderdale Cabinet. Is that possible? Because they're so critical to the success or failure of a project. Well, they are the project. I'd like to see them to just see what assumptions are being made. And the other observation, Chair, if I may, about reservoir storage, it seems that in recent years, essentially this report has sounded exactly the same whenever I've heard it. It's always, being looked at, and action will always be next year. And I'd like to see something more positive coming out of that. And so that's why I'd like to see some of the modelling. If it is complete, I want to just see if it stands up to some basic scrutiny by my group. Thank you, Chair.
Paul, do you want to come back on that?
I might, if relating to the reservoirs, I might need to pass that over to my colleagues Christian and Jenny, because I'm not and perhaps Yorkshire Water, as they're on the line as well. I'm not overly familiar with the project, I'm afraid. But in terms of wider modelling for projects, I don't see a reason why some of the reports can't be shared, providing they've been signed, approved, reviewed internally. I can't see that being an issue. But in terms of the reservoirs, I'd like to pass that over, if that's okay.
Yes. Jenny, do you want to come in here? Or Adrian?
Yeah, good. Yeah, sorry,
Jenny?
good morning. Good morning. Sorry, I'm just on my phone, so just struggled to find the mute there. Yeah, absolutely. Just to go to the first point there, the ground truthing of the modelling is an essential part of the model development. And so, any intel and any verification is always very, very welcome. On the modelling, and I will pull in Yorkshire Water here in terms of the reservoirs. An important part of developing this project further is the yield analysis. We know the last couple of years, there has been concerns around drought, and obviously water supply for our services, is essential and needs to be prioritised. So that yield analysis modelling is the next key step, and it is about when Yorkshire Water can do that valuable piece of work. And once we have that, we'll be able to develop that business case further and understand what the preferred options will be. So can I bring Yorkshire Water in here, please, for their take on this as well?
You can. Yeah,
Claire.
absolutely. Yeah, good morning. I'm not as au fait on the clean water side as I am on the wastewater side. Apologies. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't share it again with all the caveats that it's been signed off and approved internally before we share that. But yeah, well, I can take that away and make sure we come back with a complete answer for you.
Thank you. Adrian, was it on this matter or another matter? I'll bring you in then before I bring in Councillor Patient.
I think it was just, quickly to respond to the question from Councillor Lee, which I think was perhaps broader than just the modelling on the reservoirs. So again, echoing colleagues' comments, I think if the reports have been finalised and signed off, that that they should be open to inspection from anyone. I guess again, conscious I might be volunteering others for more work here, but just from experience, if it would be helpful, I think sometimes if a separate session is required on the modelling, Councillor Lee, a presentation from the modellers to talk you through the assumptions and how the models work, I think may be beneficial then to aid your further sort of review of the documents themselves.
Thank you. That would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Over to you, Councillor Patient.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, interesting that Councillor Lee thinks that perhaps the opposition group might be able to give more information on modelling than the experts in the room. But that aside,
Point of order, Chair. We don't need this.
Let me just move on to the other.
Councillor Patient, your question.
Yeah, thank you. So just wondered. I mean, so it was a really good report and probably your most glowing. So I'd echo that, Paul. Just a few bits to pick out, if at all possible. So hopefully Lauren's busy typing away, because it sounds like there's opportunity for a lot of press releases there. Yeah. In terms of some of that news, especially around the government project delivery award, and Paul, you kind of cited Calderdale being leaders again in terms of some of that partnership stuff. So a bit of information on one thing. Apparently Burnley Road Academy deployed its flood measures last night. It took them 30 minutes. They had a bit of a dry run, and the staff got to grips in terms of knowing how to use it. So I think that's a positive bit of good news, that they were told it'd take an hour and a half or 2 hours for one person to do it, but in the spirit of comradeship, they all did it together, and it took them no time at all. So they're very au fait with that. So that was a very helpful dry run. I think it's probably worth mentioning a discussion we had at Climate Action Partnership on Wednesday, which was about adaptation and the work that Calderdale's doing in terms of climate adaptation in tandem with the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission. They're specifically focusing that work on public health and the countryside team. So thinking about less about mitigation and more about the measures that we can do to protect the issues around flooding that we're going to continue having, even if we solve climate change overnight. So I think there's probably a read across there and an opportunity to link in with our public services and countryside team in terms of maximising some of those projects as well. I think that's probably it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ian Day from Public Services is actually here on the call. So that point about linking up some of the public services side, I think will be noted. Any other questions on Paul's report? No. Oh, Helen, Councillor Brundell.
Thank you. I didn't have my video on, so I don't blame you missing me. Two different questions. So I know on the Burnley Road, the school scheme, I know Councillor Patient mentioned at full council, I think, in response to a question that there may be other similar I wondered if there's any more insight into that. And secondly, and I'll declare that I live within the area affected by the Walsden scheme. Any idea of timescales on that, given the changes, and where you're up to in terms of looking at those other options and what that might mean for timescales of the scheme? Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Paul.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Blunder, I missed part of your query.
I think it was schools, any more schools that are in line for the kind of work that's happened at Burnley.
Yeah, and Christian might know a little bit, but I believe the Department for Education are looking at the two schools in Hebden Bridge. It's Central Street and Riverside. I think they've been liaising with those schools about that. There's a nod of a head from Adrian, so that's positive. And there is another one, I think, in Todmorden as well. So there are other ones that they're looking at as part of it. They've got a wide strategy and looking at reducing flood risk to schools that are shown at flood risk on. So yeah, it's not the only one, which is really good news. In terms of Walsden, it's not imminent that the challenge with, well, there's many challenges with the Walsden project. One is around a funding gap. I mentioned that we've got that still significant funding gap, even though it's less significant, but it's also quite a marginal project in terms of the cost and the benefit, because it's a very costly project, unfortunately, and there aren't a huge amount of benefits in Walsden. So we're needed to work very hard to keep that as a positive scheme. I believe the timescales, it's sort of 2025, 26, if it is a viable scheme, so it is some way off still, unfortunately. But but the positive is we've just got approval to look at this in more detail with a significant sum of money to further investigate and reduce that risk and find that really preferred option that will better protect the community.
Thank you. And I think Paul, you and Lauren will have noted the good news stories. It's good to have some good news stories sometime around flooding in terms of some of the community reassurance that things are actually happening. If people are content, to thank Paul and to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the 4 highlight reports. And I'll reissue the reminder to the committee that highlight means that you've got the reports in front of you, the set of 4 reports this time. So I'm going to take community resilience first, which is Katie Kimber, Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything to add to my report. It is as read. So yeah, I can answer any questions if anybody wants and to ask any, but otherwise it is as read. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions on Katie's report? Just from me, congratulations to the Todmorden flood wardens and 10 years of work. That is really very impressive, really, and growing from such a small number. And really tribute to their work. Anybody else on that one? No, I'm not seeing any hands. Can we move on to natural flood management? Who's that? Is that Paul? Is that you?
That's me, actually.
It's Ben. Of course it is.
Sorry, I was having trouble with my microphone there. Not much to add on top of the report, apart from some very good news regarding the landscape recovery scheme bid, which we've been successful in getting through to the development stage. That's a £750,000 project, looking at moorland restoration and tree planting in Clough Woodland, in Cloughs and river valleys. And there's a potential for 20 years of funding off the back of that. So it's very exciting. There'll be a public announcement to follow in due course. And one further update is on top of the my comment about tree planting happening at Batins Reservoir as part of the landscape recovery. No, sorry, there's all these names that get mixed up. Landscape for Water project led by National Trust. they'll be starting the planting of 29 hectares of woodland in January next year, so in next month, which is very exciting. I think will make a massive difference. Thank you.
Thank you. And it was a very full report full of interesting projects, actually, in terms of things like tree planting, etc. And I hope that all the landowners who did get trees through one of these schemes will actually make sure that the figure was 8,375 trees to be planted as part of the Calderdale Natural Flood Management Landowner Grant Scheme. That's fantastic, actually, and it'd be good to have a bit of publicity in terms of some of those landowners, you know, credit to them in the work that they're doing. Anybody else for that one? Adrian.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to come in really and just highlight again, I guess, something that Ben's touched on in his report and touched on in his verbal update, which is this landscape recovery bid, which is fantastic news, really. And I think building on the work the partnership has already done on catchment-wide measures, natural flood management, I think this is another opportunity now for us to push on again and continue to sort of, I think, lead the way really in this partnership catchment-wide approach to reducing flood risk in the Calder Valley. And not only that, I think this work now starts to go beyond flood risk and start to weave in a lot of the other benefits that we have seen from that approach. So it's very welcome news. We are in this period now of enrolment, I think it's referred to, where we're looking at the agreements with DEFRA and other partners. But fingers crossed, it should be a really, really positive thing for the Valley.
It's fantastic, and I believe that, although it's not necessarily formally public, I believe that Councillor Patient couldn't contain himself and mentioned it in his update to his report at council meeting. I was at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority yesterday, and one of the projects in front of us for passing through the assurance process was a project of natural flood management and tree planting, etc., at Wortley Beck on the borders of Leeds and Bradford. And Wortley Beck, although it's a minor river, a tributary, it does actually flow into the River Aire and has an impact on the houses and businesses further downstream. And I just wanted to ask officers to reassure us that in terms of other sources of funding, such as the West Yorkshire Combined Authority funding, as well as government funding and other sources, are fully being explored for some of the natural flood management possibilities. I'll come back to you, Ben or Adrian, whichever.
Well, I'm happy to give an answer and
yes,
and for Ben to chip in or correct me if I get this wrong, but I think there are a number of other funding streams that we've been investigating. I can go, I'd have to get the breakdown, but I do think we have been successful in securing some of the additional funding from the Combined Authority. However, I also think this is an area that we can do more on, and I believe there's more local levy funding through the Flood Committee leader that we could bid into to support some of the work that we're doing. And I was going to touch on this perhaps under the resilient infrastructure, but we have now appointed a new corporate lead for flood risk management at Calderdale, who will join us just after Christmas. That will be, again, there's been a lot of pressure on the team for the last year or two. We have a lot of operational pressure anyway, again, which Mohammed will touch on, but I'm really hopeful that the new corporate lead one of their focus areas will be securing additional funding in addition to the huge amount of work that's happening already, particularly in partnership with the Environment Agency, but on perhaps some of the smaller scale interventions and NFM. And I'm convinced that we will, we'll be successful in that as well.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing reports on that in due course. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we move.
Sorry, Leader, very briefly.
Oh,
Sorry.
Scott. Yeah.
just very briefly on your last point, it's probably worth saying that Sally Kelling has been really good in flagging up funding opportunities. I know she recently this week posted about I think it's called Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund, which is sort of coming live in the next couple of days. And I think testament to the partnership in that readiness and that ability to sort of grant bid collectively, like we did with the successful bid that was just mentioned, is sort of key to us accessing some of those grants. It's probably worth saying that the one I couldn't wait to mention at full council as well probably has a bit of a read across with what you were mentioning before in terms of some potential opportunities for weir removal to aid some of the sort of fish life within there and think about improving biodiversity along the watercourse as well. So some really good opportunities around the corner. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on then, if I may, to communications. Lauren, is that you? And we can't hear you at the moment. I think you need, yeah. Nope, still can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Certainly can. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Good morning. Sorry about that. So yeah, I do have a couple of changes to my report. One very exciting change, which you'll hopefully all know by now, is that the Calderdale Climate Action Plan has now launched. It launched on Wednesday, and we plan to wave that we plan to launch in a couple of waves. So the first wave was very much about having the plans online digitally, doing some organic social media posting. There was an intro video with councillor patient, a press release, and the case studies have now gone live. So hopefully you can help in sharing all those messages. And then in the following weeks, we will have print versions ready and distributed, as well as audio versions, different languages, and an easy read. And the rest of the comms, which are all outlined in the comms plan. So that's some really good, exciting news, hopefully. And then not included in the report was the landscape recovery, which I will be working with Ben on some media opportunities. And I just wanted to highlight quickly that the advert for the other half of the comms role has now gone out. So again, that was in the report, but just to let you know that the advert is now live.
Thank you. Any questions on communications? Nope. Lauren, could you make sure that all group leaders get a copy of the small number of printed copies that are done, please?
Yes, they're on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The fourth highlight report, resilience infrastructure. Adrian, I think that's you.
It is, thank you, Leader, but I will shortly pass over to Mohammed because this is probably an update where we have seen quite a bit of change since the reports were submitted. So clearly we've been in a very wet period. We've also had Storm Babette as well, which came through and caused quite a lot of impact. So we got a lot of reports of flooding again, which and impacts, which I'll pass over to Mohammed to go into in a bit more detail, but also perhaps we're seeing a lot of land instability issues as well across the borough. So some of the reports in their nature are relatively straightforward, but there's a sliding scale right up to extremely complicated and involved investigations into either flood risk or land instability, which again Mohammed and his team are responding to and dealing with extremely professionally, but it is a particularly busy time. But Mohammed, do you want to come in and just give a brief update on the incidents that you're looking into?
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
From the 1st of July to 30th of November, we've received approximately 202 reported incidences of either flooding or land drainage issues. Majority of those reports were in October and November. Out of the 202 new reports, 43 still require a site visit. 110 have been dealt with either remotely or following a site visit and an investigation, or the report is signposted to the relevant organisation. The 49 remainder that have been visited are our ongoing investigations. which then takes our total outstanding sites that we're looking at to 155. That's up to the 30th of November again. That total of 155 includes outstanding site visits, and the breakdown of the remaining sites that have been visited. Majority of those are being investigated on site, approximately 73, and other sites we're in contact with riparian owners to confirm works have been carried out, or that we're waiting on further information from other organisations and carrying out desktop records. Okay.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's been a particularly wet period, really, this autumn. But I guess in terms of climate change, we can expect more of those. Anything to add, Adrian?
There's nothing else to add from me. It's whether colleagues from Network Rail or Yorkshire Water wish to add anything, but other than that, nothing else from me, Chair.
Anything from Yorkshire Water and Network Rail, folks? I think Claire had to sign out and back in again from Yorkshire Water. And I have to say that this question of managing the assets and managing the impact of the changing climate is one that I hear a lot from colleagues across the West Yorkshire authorities, really, and the question of the cost of maintaining assets and moving that from the initial stages into the mainstream process of checking and repairing and reinstalling is a real problem for guest councils across the country, and it's something that myself and some other leaders discussed with the chair of Yorkshire Water, because clearly, particularly in this bit of Yorkshire, our fates are closely entwined in terms of managing obviously water flow, but also managing the assets. And I want to apologise, Adrian, that so many of those new reports of potential flooding sites have come from London Foot Ward, which is got a number of particular problems with steep-sided valleys and plenty of water. So I'm not seeing any questions yet for Adrian or Mohammed. It was a very comprehensive report. Thank you. Okay, I shall move on then. Yorkshire Regional Flooding and Coastal Committee update. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple of main points that came from the meeting. Obviously, it's a ginormous meeting, so papers are available to view online. But the main points are we set the levy at the last committee, which we set at 4%. This was to reflect the current picture amongst councils at the moment. As we know, it's a difficult time, but it was noted that the levy is useful, very useful, and gives us scope to further protect our communities. And as we know, for areas like Calderdale, it's particularly beneficial. And, you know, we need lots more schemes to happen across Calderdale, so the levy will become really important for us, I think, in particular over the next couple of years. In the Chair's report, from the committee, it was noted that flooding over the last quarter has been mainly flash flooding, which we've suffered from here, in particular with Storm Babette. And it was noted that unfortunately somebody had lost their life in, well, a couple drowned in their car in Liverpool over some of those events, which is really upsetting and just shows you that, you know, the force of water is extremely dangerous and we're all at risk at times. With that in mind, with the flash flooding, we suffer a lot with surface water flooding here, and it's really pleasing to see that as part of the West Yorkshire Flood Innovation Programme, that the forecasting of surface water is one of those projects, and this will be so useful, not just for us here, but across West Yorkshire and you know, across the UK. Really, it's one of those that we find really difficult to predict. We can pretty much tell people about the rivers, but it's really so difficult on the ground to predict surface water. So obviously there's challenges going forwards, but the topic continues to move up the agenda. And lastly, the aspect of continuity was provided through the flood and coastal risk management strategy, and it's shaped the 6-year programme. Successful delivery is a key focus for the committee. The element of change was brought through with fresh vigour, directed towards ensuring that we bring considerable ambitions of the programme to fruition. Notwithstanding the significant challenges, which we know are capacity, supply and construction costs at the moment, which are facing all risk management authorities. But there's appetite for change, for streamlining, for creativity and imagination in how we work to ensure those successful outcomes. So it's, with delivery data and pace being the key considerations that run through the updates for the next, for the 6-year programme, really. So, but there's lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes through in the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. And I understand did you have your last meeting in person in York?
We did. It was really good. Yeah, I didn't mention that. We went to York and had a look at the rather fancy measures that they have in York, and it was really great to see that a lot of them you couldn't really tell a lot of them. It was quite great, like the museum gardens, it was all landscaping, bunds, and it was really, to anybody that was unaware of any work that was going on there, it was difficult to actually see in those gardens. Obviously, right down by the river, you can see the glass panelling and things, but it's all done really tastefully for those homeowners. So it was really great actually to go and have a wander around, and it was right before Storm Babette, so they were all gearing up for potential effects of that. So yeah, and it was great to intermingle with lots of different people from across the region and their challenges. But yeah, it was great to see. I think there's going to be more of that. I think we've got maybe April. I can't remember where I'll be visiting, but yeah, they're going to mix it up so we get to see other areas and their flood defences, which is brilliant. See what everywhere's done and their different challenges that they've got to cope with. And of course, we welcome them with open arms to Calderdale to have a look at what we do.
I'm just about to say that. I think this committee, I think you'll all agree with me that through you, Councillor Kimber, I think we issue a warm invitation to see, especially with Paul's very positive report, just different examples of how we deal with flooding in Calderdale, particularly given we're such a different set of rivers and becks from the Ouse, from the situation in York, where the water comes up very slowly and goes down very slowly, whereas we have the opposite. We have a very flashy system where it comes up very quickly. But I think they would be interested to see some of our natural flood management, some of what's been done elsewhere, and also some of the things I think we are very good at, which is not just the walls and the defences, but the way in which flood wardens have been developed and engaged, and also the way in which natural flood management has made a difference in the valley in terms of slowing the flow. So if you could pass on this committee's strong desire to see a visit, and maybe this committee could actually go and meet with the Yorkshire committee, perhaps at one of the stops. I think I'm not seeing anybody demurring from that, so do pass on that invitation. Thank you. Thank you for your report. We've got a section on the agenda for public question time. Then, Diane, have we had any notification of any questions from the public?
We've not been noted of any questions today, Chair.
Thank you. I know we do sometimes, but not this time. Well, if that's the case, can I thank everybody for their contributions and bring this meeting to a close. Have a good afternoon and indeed have a good weekend. And let's hope no more flood alerts.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.